and welcome to the American Bar Association section of Environment, Energy, and Resources podcast. I'm Shelly Geppert with the law firm of Eimer Stahl. I'm proud to serve as planning chair for SEER's 27th Fall Conference, taking place at the Westin Copley Place in Boston from September 11th to 14th. This year, our conference will feature two very special keynote presentations. On September 12th, Jeffrey Clark, Assistant Attorney General with the Environmental and Natural Resources Division of the Department of Justice, Matt Leopold, the General Counsel of the Environmental Protection Agency, and Mary Newmeyer, the Chairwoman of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, will be discussing the Trump administration's environmental, energy, and resources agenda, including implementation of the agenda and what's in store for the remainder of 2019 and beyond. On September 13th, Alicia Barton, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, Alexandria McBride, the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Oakland, California, and Melissa Hoffer, Chief of the Energy and Environmental Bureau in the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office, will discuss the role of government in promoting an equitable transition to renewable energy, the growth of renewable energy, and the use of renewable energy to mitigate climate change. In addition, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey will join us to share her thoughts on the future of renewable energy. In total, our conference features 18 CLE-accredited panels spanning a wide variety of issues. Today, you will hear from Fall Conference Planning Committee members Justin Smith, Teresa Christopher, Larry Cullen, and Jessica Wall, who will be sharing highlights of the panels they are most looking forward to. For additional details concerning any of the panels being discussed today, or the full lineup of panels, please be sure to visit our webpage at ambar.org/SEERFall. Details about conference registration, accommodations, and how you can receive a discount on group registration are all available at ambar.org/SEERFall. Now let's turn to Justin Smith. For over 2 decades, Justin has served in the Environmental and Natural Resources Division of the Department of Justice. Today, Justin holds the title of Assistant Section Chief of the Law and Policy Section of the Environmental and Natural Resources Division. Justin, what can you share with us about the Fall Conference panel you are most looking forward to?
The panel I've helped put together is called New Frontiers in Climate Litigation. The goal of the panel is to take a look at some of the novel climate change litigation that has been brought in the past several years. There's an abundance of litigation on novel theories now pending in federal and state court. The cases have been brought not just by the traditional individuals and NGOs that have ordinarily brought these kinds of cases, but also cities and counties and states, as well as some new plaintiffs like a fishermen's association. The panel will review these cases generally, talk about what the prospects for these cases may be, some of the hurdles, legal and factual hurdles that these lawsuits are likely to face, and project based on those analyses what future kinds of litigation may be forthcoming against private companies and government agencies in this area. We have 3 panelists who are real experts in this field and come from very different perspectives. The first is Daniel Droog, who's counsel with the Chevron Corporation, which has been named as a defendant in many of these cases, and he's obviously very familiar with the pending litigation. The second panelist is Vic Scher, who's a named partner with Scher Edling, which is representing multiple cities and counties, including San Francisco, the city of Baltimore, and the state of Rhode Island, and a number of others, in some of these cases in which they've sued a group of major oil companies based on the harms of climate change and the cost of adaptation, as they allege. Those cases are now pending in various circuit courts around the country after having been removed, and that will be a very interesting topic of discussion. Our third panelist is Kate Konchnick, who's director of the Duke Law School Climate and Energy Program, where she's been studying climate change litigation and can speak to the broader universe of climate litigation and many of the other types of cases that are pending. And then our moderator is Amanda Leiter, who's a professor at American University's Washington College of Law, where she directs their Environment and Energy Program, and she also served during the Obama administration in the U.S. Department of the Interior. Just to talk for a second about what kinds of cases are out there and to give you a taste of what is on the table for this panel to talk about. In addition to the cases I mentioned earlier brought by groups of localities. There are cases brought against the federal government and other defendants on public trust theories. That's the Juliana case, which I think many people are familiar with, the children's public trust case, but there are other similar cases. There are cases brought under state common law and statutory theories against private businesses, but also against state agencies. There's also a lot of efforts to use existing federal statutes in new ways. So there are new types of NEPA cases, cases brought under RCRA and the Clean Water Act, seeking remedies such as improved planning or adaptation efforts or other types of climate remedies. Some of these cases, it happens, are pending in New England, so the Boston venue is very appropriate for this panel. It's a really complicated set of issues that will be on the table for this panel to talk through, and we have really the perfect panelists to help us work through them and figure out where these cases may be heading. As a preview, I think they probably won't agree, which will make for a very interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to the conference as a whole myself, and I think this panel in particular will be an especially lively and informative conversation. Now I'd like to introduce another member of the planning committee, Teresa Christopher, who served for 8 years in senior positions in the Obama administration. She served both in the White House at CEQ and at the Departments of Interior, Commerce, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I think that has to be some kind of record for breadth and depth of environmental knowledge and public service. Teresa is now in the private sector, and so over to you, Teresa.
Thank you, Justin. Well, as you have heard, there are really a lot of interesting panels happening and a lot of interesting topics that this conference has just a breadth and depth of experts and experience, but one in particular that I'm excited about will take place on Thursday afternoon at 2:30, Foreseeable Future, Planning and Earth Climate Change. The panel will cover the role of lawyers in preparing their clients for the consequences of climate change and discuss key topics in prevention, response, and long-term resilience. Billions of dollars in public and private investment, property, infrastructure at risk due to climate change and impacts. Severe flooding, droughts, extreme temperatures, wildfire, rising sea levels, and more intense storms have impacted businesses, industries, and communities across the U.S. and globally. Federally declared disasters are up 250% in the past 20 years, and some reports have even quantified the value at risk to manageable assets from climate change to be more than $4.2 trillion U.S. dollars. Companies, industries, and governments at all levels are thinking about this and taking action to address some of these future impacts, and lawyers will have an important role in these efforts. This panel has a great lineup of speakers. Secretary of Natural Resources and Chief Resilience Officer of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Matt Strickler, will be there. Virginia is leading some of these efforts and has already put out actions and is taking steps thinking far into the future among our states. Alice Hill, the former Director of Resilience for the National Security Council, will also be on the panel. Taylor Pullins, from the Managing Counsel from Noble Energy, will discuss what actions he's taking in for his company and in the private sector and what you can also do with your clients. And moderating it will be Mike Gerard from Columbia Law. The panel will talk about and discuss different strategies that you can bring to your clients and things that you should be thinking about as you look forward to these future risks. I highly recommend checking this panel out. You know where you'll find me on September 12th, and so let me just pass it over to Larry. Larry Cullen is a partner at Arnold & Porter in Washington, D.C., who represents clients on administrative, regulatory, and enforcement matters involving federal agencies such as U.S. EPA, Department of Agriculture, Food and Drug Administration, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Over to you, Larry.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm excited to be able to tell everyone about a panel presentation that we've organized for Thursday, September 12th in Boston. We've assembled what I think is truly a group of the leading experts on the topic that we'll be covering, specifically current litigation that affects pesticides. The panel is going to examine the question of whether these litigations, which are national in scope, are effectively superseding government safety determinations that are made during the course of reviewing and making licensing decisions for pesticides. As I'm sure you know, all pesticides that are used in the United States have to be registered with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and EPA screens a significant portfolio of health and environmental effects data concerning these products before making its safety determination and issuing a government authorization for the products. Each states also make a similar licensing decision before these products can be sold or used in the state. However, recent and ongoing litigations, including tort claims, challenges under the Endangered Species Act, NEPA cases, and even claims under state statutes such as California's Proposition 65, fundamentally challenge the appropriateness of these government determinations. And our panel is going to include truly the nation's leading lawyers who are representing clients who are key litigants in this space. This includes the makers of pesticides, the U.S. government, defendants in state court claims, and national environmental groups. So our panel is comprised of Stephanie Parent. She's a senior attorney and really among the more prominent litigants on behalf of environmental groups, and in particular the Center for Biodiversity. Bob Perlis, the Assistant General Counsel at EPA for Pesticides Matters, also will be present. Trent Norris, a partner at Arnold & Porter and one of the sort of deans of the Proposition 65 defense bar, will round out our panel. And then we're really fortunate that the group is going to be moderated by the current chair of the ABA's Committee on Pesticides, Chemical Regulation, and Right to Know, Sarah Beth Watson from Steptoe and Johnson in their D.C. office. I certainly don't think you're going to want to miss this exciting panel. The topic is of considerable import, and these litigations have gained national prominence and could decide the future of certain companies who are also affected by these litigations, as well as national policy on a number of environmental statutes of import. I'm pleased to also be able to introduce Jessica Wall, who's going to tell you about also an important panel covering the Supreme Court of the United States and environmental decisions and looking into the future as well. Jess?
Thanks, Larry. I'm here to talk a little bit about our SCOTUS panel. As I think most environmental attorneys are following frequently what's going on in the Supreme Court and trying to figure out, what are the cases that I need to know, what are the trends going forward. I've worked with a number of folks on our Supreme Court panel to really round up those cases, talk about the highlights, and then give practitioners what they need to know going forward. So we're very excited for the panel. I think it's going to be dynamic. I think it'll be a great discussion. Our panelists are Eric Grant, who's the Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Environment and Natural Resources Division at DOJ, Peter Shao, who's a partner at King & Spalding in LA, Richard Lazarus, who's the Howard and Catherine Abel Professor of Law at Harvard Law, and then our moderator is Chuck McCutcheon, who's an editor at Bloomberg Environment. And each of our panelists has a connection in some way to some of the Supreme Court cases that we'll be discussing. Eric, I know in particular, has briefed on many of the cases for DOJ, so knows quite a bit about these cases. We're thinking of covering, opinions that have been issued, what's on the horizon in terms of the next Supreme Court session, and then a broader discussion about dynamics in the court, the different personalities, that sort of thing. So just in terms of highlights, we'll talk a little bit about the Weyerhaeuser case, the dusky gopher frog, and I expect that we'll be talking a little bit about the recent Endangered Species Act regulation revisions as well, which I think are on people's minds quite a bit. Nick, which is a case involving really a sea change in takings procedures throughout the country, so I think folks will be interested in that. Some other cases involving agency deference and what the bounds are, which I think factors in for a lot of practitioners. And then other cases like County of Maui, which I know folks have been following with interest, and also Juliana, tying into Justin's panel about climate change. So some themes that touch upon other panels as well. I know in particular they're excited about talking about Justice Stevens' legacy. That's something that we'll be covering. So we're looking forward to a really active panel discussion. Speaking as a member of the Boston environmental community, thrilled to welcome new faces to Boston and to discuss all of these different topics with fellow ABA members.
Thank you, Justin, Larry, Teresa, and Jessica. We look forward to seeing you in Boston, and we look forward to hearing from your panelists about these important issues. Again, for additional information about how to register for the conference or to see the full conference lineup, please visit ambar.org/SEER Fall. Thank you, and we'll see you in September at the Westin Copley Place.